Just to get us started, I'm sure this question's one you've been asked many times before, but what do you think is the key to the longevity of the Kingston Trio?
Me. Well, because the music is simple and it's easy for anybody to get into. Most of his story songs that are very melodic and very easy to remember compared to most other music you hear.
Mm-hmm. You were still in college when the group formed. Were you looking at the group as a career option at that stage, or was it just really for fun?
We weren't actually in college when the group formed. We were singing together as a duet with me and Nick Reynolds, and then also Dave I knew in high school in Hawaii. And we played off and on together in college. And then when we got out of college, Nick and Dave started a group called the Kingston Quartet. They started a thing called the Calypsonians. And then two of the members quit, and Nick called me. I was back in Hawaii, being the first Elvis Presley impersonator in the world, billed as Hawaii's Elvis Presley in 1956. And I went back up, and we started the group then.
Looking back now, how aware do you think Americans were of their folk music heritage at that stage?
Well, a great much of the songs that we did were not folk music, and the story of our becoming folk singers is a rather unusual one. We put our first album out in 1958, and on the album we had, along with Tom Dooley, we had folk-oriented material, calypso songs, an off-Broadway show tune, and a blues number. And a couple of disc jockeys in Salt Lake City, who were the ones who picked up on Tom Dooley, started plugging it. It became a single. The single sold 3 million records in 2 weeks and became number one in the country overnight. And a guy from Capitol Records came to us and said, here's this big bonus check for Tom Dooley. You're folk singers. And we looked at the check and said, you bet your ass we are. But we never called ourselves folk singers.
Did that success of Tom Dooley really take you by surprise? You didn't expect that at all?
Not at all. We were playing at the opening of the Royal Hawaiian Surf Room at the time that Tom Dooley became number one in the country, and we had to cut our engagement short in order to go back and promote it.
What are the origins of the name the Kingston Trio?
Well, we were sitting around one day, because we started off playing calypso music. We were sitting around one day with, what would be a good idea. And to this day, not a one of us remembered who it was that came up with it. We just said, well, Kingston, from Kingston, Jamaica.
Uh-huh.
And to this day, not a one of us has ever been there.
So would you call yourself a fan of folk music before that stage?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Why do you think that great folk revival of the early 60s happened at that particular time? I think it was just the timing was right for that sort of thing?
No, I think the timing was right. What was happening is that the States were saturated with teeny bop rock, the itsy bitsy yellow polka dot bikini stuff. And I think people were tired of this. They were numbed from the childishness of it,
mm-hmm.
and they wanted something that was a little more adult. And our music was easy for people to pick up on, and it was also easy to remember, and it was worthwhile remembering.
When that folk boom took off, did you guys receive much in the way of criticism or lack of acceptance from some in the folk fraternity for being perhaps a little bit more conservative than some of the acts on the folk scene?
Well, the real ultimate folk singers like John Jacob Niles and some of your heavy-duty people like that condemned us for what we were doing to folk music, but later on they all came to us at one time or another and said, thank you for making us money. I'm sitting here staring at the only international gold record I have that was presented by EMI Australia to the Kingston Trio, commemorating the sale in Australia of 63,986 copies of Tom Dooley to December 31st, 1960, and it was given to us in February of 1961.
Wow.
That was the equivalent in Australia of a million seller in the United States.
It would have been back then, yeah. You got quite a collection of memorabilia there, I believe.
Oh, yeah, it's all for sale.
Now, I guess the first major lineup change you had was John Stewart coming in to replace Dave. What were the circumstances there?
Well, Dave was getting to the point where he was very suspicious of a lot of stuff that was going on, and probably quite deservedly so, because we had people that were really taking us to the cleaners in the publishing business and stuff, and it all looked kind of fishy to Dave, and so he wanted to get out. So he quit. Actually, he quit and moved to Australia and had his own TV program.
That's right.
And Stuart had written songs for us, and so we looked around. We auditioned a couple of guys. One of the guys we auditioned was Roger McGuinn, who became one of the Byrds. But he was too young at the time. Another guy that we auditioned was one of the guys that ended up in one of the modern folk quartet who produced all of the Monkees albums.
Oh, yeah. Now, John brought a real songwriting element to the trio. Was that something you felt that it needed at the time?
Well, John was always we thought it was good for us at the time because of the change. However, John got very upset because I didn't like most of his songs. But the ones that I did like, most of them we did.
Yeah. Thinking back to those early days, how did the selection process work in terms of choosing material to record?
Well, it had to be something that we all three agreed on. If two guys liked it in particular and one guy didn't, that guy would at least usually try it to see what it came out as. And if he still didn't like it after it was recorded, it was discarded.
And what about in the recording process itself? Were things democratic like that as well?
In the recording process, what?
In the recording process, was it pretty much everybody had an equal say in how things were recorded as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You released an extraordinary amount of material in those early years. I think it was 10 albums up in the first few years, wasn't it?
Yeah, we recorded up to between 57 and 67. We recorded over 400 songs.
Oh. Was that pretty much by your choice to put out albums at such a rapid rate, or was that a record company thing?
Well, it was a record company thing because albums were new then. In 1957 and 58, 59, albums were actually quite a new thing to the United States. That was when they first started making a lot of albums. And they saw that they could sell our albums very quickly. And so they actually, in our first 3 years of being on the road, we were on the road 280 days a year, and we also had to make 3 to 4 albums a year also.
Wow.
That's unheard of.
It just wouldn't happen nowadays.
No.
There is an enormous catalogue of Kingston Trio recordings out there. Do you sometimes come across albums in your travels that you never even knew existed?
Well, they were cut in places all over the world, and there's a lot of albums, but most of the songs on the album we know. We have a set show now with the guys that I have with me. One of the fellas has been with me, George Grove, has been with me for 26 years, and Bob Hayworth off and on for 6 years. And we constantly sing basically the same show, but we do have the flexibility that if anybody calls out a particular song from the old Kingston Trio, 9 out of 10 times we could either do part of it or do the whole thing.
Do you remember a time when you felt that the great folk revival of the 60s was starting to fade, that things were starting to slip away?
Well, we could feel it changing right around 1965. With the Beatles coming over. The Beatles opened a show for us in England when we were playing there in 1962. And we made the mistake of coming back to Capitol Records, not realizing that they were owned by an English corporation. We came back to the executives of Capitol Records and told them about this fantastic group we heard in London. And it turned out that it was the Beatles,
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that they dropped our contract for the Beatles the next year.
When the trio disbanded the first time in 1967, could you see the writing on the wall for a while? Was that more or less inevitable that it was going to happen?
Well, we saw that coming. We actually did it very amiably. We said, hey, we got other things we want to do right now, and we've made a lot of money and enough to last for a while. So let's just sit back, and we had a good, successful restaurant going and some property and stuff. And I went off as a single, and it lasted about 6 months before I realized I didn't enjoy working as a single compared to working with the group. So I leased the name New Kingston Trio from our own company, and I went on the road as the New Kingston Trio from late 1960, early 1968 until 1976 when I purchased the name from our own corporation.
Right. How do you look back on that time now? Was it an enjoyable period for you?
No.
No?
No, it was very difficult because what I was trying to do is a lot of new material, and even by then, people just wanted to hear the old stuff.
Right.
So about 6 years ago, I said, I'm going to change our whole format of playing live, and we're only going to do the old stuff. And as a result of it, we've gotten very good bookings.
After spending so many years in a group which has an emphasis on harmony singing, what for you is the essential element of good harmony singing?
Well, it should be natural. You should have a natural ability to do it. And so I got guys with me. The strange thing is my two partners are both majored in music. And the original group, we all majored in business administration. And what we did was natural. So now, in order to recreate the same sound, you need to have guys who are really good in music that can listen to something and be able to reproduce the same sound in their head at the same time as they're playing their instruments.
Just for our listeners down here who haven't seen you for quite a while, what's the current lineup of the trio? And just a little bit about the background of the other guys too.
George Grove is the banjo player, plays banjo and guitar. He's the one that's been with me 26 years. And our guitar player plays tenor guitar. Although he plays 90 instruments, he plays tenor guitar to recreate the same sound of the original group. Is Bob Hayworth, Haworth, and our bass player just quit. He was with me for 27 years, but he decided he needed to get away from the road because of the September 11th thing. Every time he got on an airplane, he started getting crazy. And so he just retired after 27 years, and our bass player that he took the place of just came back, Paul Gabrielson. And
how much of the year would you be spending on the road these days? What's the current?
We spend basically the same amount of time we have always spent, about 28 weeks a year.
Wow. And the types of venues you're playing?
We play fine arts centers. We play symphony concerts. We have symphony arrangements. We do symphonies. We play Las Vegas. We play private parties. We play conventions. About the same thing as we always did. And even that, this very interesting thing your people might want to hear is that the fact that our money that we make, even in our biggest years of selling records, we still made more money off of personal appearances because that's what we wanted to be as a live act.
Yeah, that was first and foremost ahead of being a recording act, was it?
You also might get a kick out of knowing that the travel company we use is owned by Mel Gibson.
Is that right? You mentioned the symphony concerts. How did they evolve?
Well, George, being a music major and having played with the Army Band at one time, is a good musical arranger, and he arranged most of our stuff for symphony. In your pops concerts here in the States, it is very popular to use big recording artists from any time period who have symphonic arrangements and use them for shows, especially the age group of the people that go to symphonies mostly is 50 on up, and that's perfectly within our register of what we want to draw in the first place. And so the thing that we're the most proud of is that we make money for every place we play.
And how would a typical symphony show be structured? Is it the orchestra on stage with you the whole time?
No, what we do is no normal symphony concert. The first half of the concert is played just by the symphony. The second half is played by the Kingston Trio and the symphony. And what we do is some of the songs we play with them, most of the songs we play with them, and some we play without.
Uh-huh.
To show the audience the transition between working alone and working with the symphony.
Right. And what about in terms of recording new material? You still active that way?
Well, we haven't recorded a new record for a couple of years now, and we're talking about it, but it's very hard because of the fact you do work so much, and we live in 3 different cities.
Uh-huh.
I live in Phoenix, Arizona, where it's a beautiful day of 72 degrees and the sun is shining today, and Bob Hayworth lives up in Denver, Colorado, and George Grove lives in Las Vegas, and our bass player lives in Seattle.
That must make things difficult sometimes conducting group business.
Yeah, well, it's not bad. I own the group, so I just do it right here out of my office. You know, that I majored in business, and when I majored in business, one of the things I learned is you make the money, you put it in the checking account, you write the checks.
What about some of the current day acoustic performers? Do you get much chance to listen to what's going around these days?
Oh, we see stuff now and then, but in being on the road as much as we are, we really don't have much time to go see live acts because when we go home, we're sort of tired. We want to hang around the house. But we see acts. Some of that have been out there for a long time. Some of them haven't. But I think if I ever quit this thing, I'd probably try and be a manager.
Oh, right.
Find some hot young group.
And what are the future plans for the trio? How much longer do you see it going on?
Well, we intend to do this forever. Actually, I heard a guy say once, I intend to live forever. So far, so good. but I will stay in the business until I feel my voice going, and then I'd quit.
Yeah.
I'm 68 now, so I could probably do it for another 2 or 3 years before the voice starts to go. It normally starts to go in your early 70s.
When that time comes, would you like to see perhaps somebody else take over the Kingston Trio name and keep it going?
I have already picked out my replacement, and the two guys that are with me now are 10 years younger than me anyway, so that the guy that I had taken as my replacement is about 3 years older than they are, and he sings just like me, and he used to sing with me back in the late 60s.
Oh, right. Anyone we know?
No, he's a guy by the name of Dave Peel. He's worked on his own for years, and he's sung with other groups and things. But he's a contractor in Nashville right now. But he does part-time work as a singer.
And he would be interested in continuing on?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
And I would lease them the name, and hopefully they would bring me money on my retirement.
They've got it all worked out, Bob.
I hope so.
Looking back now, what would you like to see the Kingston Trio best remembered for?
Playing good music.
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's basically, of the 400 songs, you can pick any one of the songs of it, and you can play it on the record player. And when the record is finished, 9 out of 10 times you can remember the melody right through.
Yeah.
I've had more famous rock and rollers come up to me and said if it hadn't been for the Kingston Trio, they never even picked up guitars when they were kids. I taught Joe Walsh how to tune a guitar when he was 15 from the Eagles,
Yeah.
And I've had the Allman Brothers have said this to us. I've had black entertainers say it to me. And I always tell them it's funny because it was black entertainers that got me into the business.
Oh, that's certainly an achievement to take pride in, for sure. Just to finish up, Bob, any regrets? Anything if you could go back and change it that you would?
I think it would have been nice to be able to have Dave stay with the group.
Yeah.
There should have been some way we could work it out because we were on a roll, and I think that you can't say that's all. But I think that Dave staying with the group, we could have continued a little better for a little while.
Yeah. Okay, Bob. Look, I want to thank you for your time. It's been a lot of fun talking to you and catching up with you after all this time.
Great, thank you very much.
We certainly hope you could just make one more visit down to Australia before you give it away.
Find somebody to book us. Our card used to read when we were in college, and it's still basically in our minds. We play anywhere for money.
Terrific, Bob. Well, I hope we can see something up. I'll sniff around for you.
Thank you, John.
Okay, thanks for your time.
Goodbye.
All the best. Bye-bye.